Okay, so welcome ulit sa ating class na Information Management. And i-discuss naman natin yung second part nitong database design. So ang topic nating napag-aralan dun sa una na topic natin was what is database design, what is the database development life cycle, database normalization, and ngayon ang pag-uusapan naman natin is yung entity relationship model. So data model, move from informal description of what the user wants to precise description of what can be implemented in a database management system. So kung ano yung pwede mong ilagay sa sa DBMS mo. Ayun. So yung nagraran ng database natin Okay, so steps in developing a database. We have the requirements analysis. Then magagawa tayo from the requirements analysis, gagawa tayo ng conceptual database design. So actually, pagka gumawa tayo ng conceptual database design, kailangan ng approval ng company, ng managers, business managers dun sa client natin kung tama yung understanding natin on the conceptual level. So kung may approval na yung conceptual database design, then we can proceed to logical database design. Kailangan natin itong i-analyze, actually i-normalize. Pagka may logical database ka na, i-normalize na natin yan. Ang tawag doon is schema refinement. Other words, normalization. And then, pagka okay na yung ating logical database design, then we can proceed to physical database design. So, specific na siya sa database management natin. So, in our case, MySQL yung gagamitin natin. So, kung ano yung rules, mga data types na meron ang MySQL, yun yung ilalagay natin sa physical database design. So, pag in-implement na yan, ibig sabihin, na-code na natin sa MySQL codes. Ang susunod na is applications and security. Ikakabit na natin dun sa ating running program and then implement natin yung mga security na pwede natin i-apply dun sa database management system natin. Okay, so conceptual design. The ER model or entity relationship model is used at this stage. So from conceptual design pa lang, gumagamit na tayo ng ER model. So again, dalawa yung ER models, actually, yung isa is yung UML. Yung pangalawa is itong Peter Chen ER model. Si Peter Chen kasi yung nag-propose ng ER modeling. And then later na lang nagkaroon ng UML or Unified Modeling Language. Okay, what are the entities and relationships in the enterprise? What information about these entities and relationships should we store in the database? What are the integrity constraints or business rules that hold? Ayun, so integrity constraints para hindi nawawala yung hindi tayo nagkakaroon ng orphan data, yung nawawala yung related data. Business rules naman, kagaya nga nung sinabi ko last time, na may rule ba tayo regarding how to divide, for example, yung isang information attribute, kagaya ng name. Ano yung rules natin sa pag-divide ng name or pag-i-store ng name? Yung enye ba ay i-recognize natin or not. Yun. Part ng business rule yun. Yung rules sa numbering, pagbibigay, may rules din tayo or may policy tayo din sa pagbibigay ng mga ID numbers sa employees, for example. Ayun, kasama sa mga business rules yun. Kung paano tayo mag-sort, A to Z ba o Z to A ba? Ascending or descending, ayun, etc. So a database schema in ER model can be represented pictorially. So using ER diagram notation nga. Can map an ER diagram into relational schema. Okay, so ER model basic. So ang gagamitin natin yung Peter Chen. So definition, what is an entity? Entities are real-world object distinguishable from other objects. They are represented by singular nouns. Okay guys ha, singular dapat yung nasa loob ng entity. So tingnan natin yung sa diagram, ano? Ayun. Ang entity ay nakalagay sa isang rectangular box and then represented by a noun na singular form. So an entity is described using a set of attributes. So yung nakapaligid na oval, oblong sa employee, nakalagay is SSN, name at saka lot, nakalagay sa loob ng nakalagay sa loob ng oval, oblong. So ang tawag dito ay attributes. Tapos may mapapansin kayong isa, yung SSN, actually social security number ang ibig sabihin nun. Ang tawag doon, so may underline siya, no? Ang tawag doon key attribute. So yung name at saka lot, these are non-key attributes dahil wala silang underline. Yung may underline, key attribute ang tawag. So yan yung ER, naka-ER modeling notation. Okay, pwede natin i-represent yan into yung tinatawag na entity set, or in other words, table format. Naka-table format. Entity set ang tawag natin doon, ano? So, ano yung elements ng entity set? So, nakalagay dyan yung name ng entity, which is employee. So, employees yung table. So, from a singular, naging, plural ito kasi naka-table format na. Okay? So, hindi na lamang yung column names ang nakalagay, kundi may values na sa ilalim. Yung mga values sa ilalim, ang tawag na doon, entity set. Okay? And then, yung isang collection ng values na naka-filled up yung bawat attribute, yung SSN, name, at saka lot, yung isang set na ganon, related set, entity instance ang tawag natin doon. Ayan. So, definition ng entity set. An entity set is a collection of similar entities. So, lahat sila ay employees na meron pare-parehong attributes, SSN, name, at saka lot. Okay. So, yung isang column, yung mga values under, for example, name, ang tawag doon yun yung domain ng name. Yung lahat ng values sa ilalim ng SSN, yun yung domain ng attribute na SSN. Yung value sa ilalim ng lot, yun yung domain ng attribute na lot. Okay? Okay, so dito tayo sa sunod na slide. Ipinapakita ko lang dito yung iba't ibang klase so itong nasa kaliwa, ito yung diagram natin kanina. Itong nasa kanan, ito yung iba't ibang klase ng entities. So meron tayong two types ng entities. Yung single line na rectangle, strong entity ang tawag doon. Pag naging double lines na, weak entity ang tawag natin doon. Sa ilalim naman, yung different types ng attribute. Pagka single line yung yung border line ng oval natin, simple attribute ang tawag natin doon. Again, pagka may underline yung name ng attribute, ang tawag natin doon ay key attribute. Pag double lines naman ang represented ng attribute, ito yung multi-value attribute. So for example, ang nakalagay dyan ay contact number, tapos multi-value siya. Ibig sabihin, yung isang entity instance or yung isang person, for example, hindi lang iisa ang contact number niya, kundi maraming contact numbers. Ayan. So, for example, address naman ang naka-double line, ibig sabihin, hindi lang iisa yung address, maraming addresses na tinitirhan yung isang entity instance na may name. Ayun. So, multi-value attribute yun. And then, yung derived attribute. Ito naman yung attribute na hindi mo kailangang i-store sa iyong database bagkus i-compute mo na lang. Magraran ka ng process para i-compute. For example, ang iyong attribute ay birth date. So, from birth date, pwede kang mag-compute para makuha mo yung age. So, yung age ngayon na kinompute from the attribute na birth date, yung age attribute, pwedeng sabihin nating derived siya. Kasi kinompute siya from birth date. Ano pa ba yung pwede nating um, i-compute, ano? Pwedeng lapse time. Ayan. So, meron kang start time, meron kang end time, and then computein mo yung difference ng dalawa, magkakaroon ka ng elapsed time. Okay? So, next is yung relationships. Yung definition is, relationship is an association among two or more entities. Ayan. Association among two or more entities. So, example, yung Allison works in pharmacy department. So, ayun, sa ilalim, ano, yung binary relationship, yung employee named Allison works in a department na ang tawag ay pharmacy department. Ayan. Yung nasa taas, ano naman, unary. Yung nasa ibaba, binary relationship siya kasi meron siyang relationship na works in, tapos, nirelate niya or kinonect niya, in-associate niya yung employee sa department, dalawang entities. So, isang relationship, pero dalawang entities, binary yun. Yung nasa taas naman, isang relationship at saka isang entity lang din, dahil isang entity ang nagpa-participate sa relationship, unary relationship ang tawag doon. Okay? Relationship set. Again, yung relationship set is a collection of similar relationships. So, pag dumami yung ano, no, yung relationships. Okay, hindi ko mapakita dito. But for now, let's concentrate on the unary relationship at saka binary relationship. Yung relationship set is a collection of similar relationships lang, ano. Okay, so relationship cardinality and constraints. So consider natin yung relationship na works in. So dito may business rule na an employee can work in at most one department. A department can have at most many employees assigned to it. Ayan. So, meron siyang tinatawag na relationship na many employees works in one department. Ang tawag doon, many to one relationship. Ayan. So, tingnan natin yung nasa ilalim. Ano? Merong mga oblongs na meron siyang mga entity instances. So, yung nasa kaliwa nitong unang figure na may relationship, yung nasa kaliwa may 5 instances dun sa entity niya. Yung nasa kanan ay merong 4 na instances. So, makikita natin dun sa unang relationship na bawat isang instance dito sa kaliwa ay related sa isang instance dito sa kanan. So, ganun, ayun, 3 relationships. Bawat isa ay sa 3 nasa kaliwa, isa lang din ang related sa kanan. So, ang tawag doon, one-to-one relationship. Okay? One-to-one relationship. Yung pangalawa, makita natin 3 instances sa kaliwa ay related sa 4 na instances dito sa kanan. And makikita natin yung pangalawa na instance dito sa kaliwa ay related sa 2 instances sa kanan. So, ibig sabihin, one-to-many relationship. Ayan. Yung sa susunod, ito yung kagaya nung sa works in na example natin kanina. Bali, ayan. apat na instance sa kaliwa ay related sa 3 instances lang dito sa kanan. So, yung pangatlo at saka panglimang instance dito sa kaliwa ay related sa pangatlong instance sa kanan. So, that means many to one na relationship. Dito naman sa panghuli na example natin, makikita natin yung pangalawang instance ay related sa pangalawa at saka pang-apat na instance sa kanan, at saka yung sa kanan naman, yung unang instance is related dun sa first at saka fourth na instance dito sa kaliwa. So, makikita natin dito yung many-to-many relationship. Ang ginagamit nating notation sa many-to-many, yung unang many ay M. Pag nagamit nyo na yung M, pwede na yung N. Pag nagamit nyo na yung MN, pwede na yung O. Pero usually, dalawa lang naman. So, normally M at saka N lang yung nagagamit. Bihira yung O, yung P, yung Q. Bihira yon. So, normally, binary lang yung relationship. Okay? So, may tinatawag na cardinality at saka participation constraints. Yung cardinality, ito yung dito sa example natin, may naging dalawa yung dalawa yung number sa kaliwa, dalawa yung number sa kanan. 0.m at saka 1.1. Okay. 0.m saka 1.1. Okay, inayos ko lang. Para mas malinaw tingnan. Medyo magkadikit. Ayan. So, yung cardinality, yun yung number sa kanan. So, yun yung maximum na pwedeng relatable from each side, from yung entity instances sa left, maximum nun na pwedeng i-relate sa instances sa right. So, yung M at saka M sa kaliwa at saka 1 sa kanan, yun yung maximum, yun yung cardinality. Ano naman yung participation? Participation constraints. Ito naman yung minimum na participation. So, yung employee, papunta sa works in, 0.m. Ano ibig sabihin ng 0? Yung employee, pwedeng mag-participate or pwedeng hindi mag-participate sa works in na relationship. So, ibig sabihin, optional yung, so hindi lahat ng instance niya ay kailangan. Hindi kailangan lahat ng instances na nasa entity set ni employee ay kailangan mag-participate dun sa relationship na works in. So, optional. Pwedeng sumali, pwedeng hindi. Okay? While yung nasa kanan naman, yung department, minimum 1, maximum 1. So, ibig sabihin, at the minimum, dapat talaga na mag-participate yung department. Ibig sabihin, pag nawala yung relationship na works in, mababaliwala na rin or mawawalang saysay yung department. Ayan. Mawawala yung department. Kaya minimum of 1. Pag hindi siya nag-participate, mawawala siya sa sa relationship ultimately. So, ayan, later babalikan natin 'to Pero yun muna yung explain natin. Ulit, yung kaliwa, yun yung participation constraint na number. So, pag 1, yun ang minimum, ibig sabihin, kailangan niya mag-participate, kailangan nung bawat instance sa entity set, kailangan mag-participate sa relationship. Pag 0, optional, hindi required. So, optional yung pag-participate ng bawat entity instance dun sa relationship set. Yung kanan naman, yun yung cardinality, pwedeng one or many. Ayan. Okay, so participation constraints. Earlier, it was mentioned that a department can have many employees and that an employee is still an employee even if he or she is not working in or hindi nagpa-participate dun sa relationship na working in a department. ang tawag natin doon is partial participation, or in other words, optional participation. Consequently, an employee can only work for one department and that the department cannot exist without at least one employee. So, ibig sabihin daw, pagka yung department walang nagtatrabaho na doon, mawawala na si department. Okay? Unlike si employee, kahit hindi siya naka-assign sa kahit anong department, employee pa rin siya. So, nasa business rules yun. Ano? So, kailangan tanungin natin yung client natin kung ano yung business rule nila in terms of employee assignment. So, in this case, may tinatawag siguro na floating status, meaning may employee na employee pa rin, sinuswelduhan pa rin, kahit hindi siya naka-assign sa isang department. So, yung required participation, yung hindi optional, ang tawag doon total participation. Okay, so yung yung entity na pwedeng partial lang yung participation sa relationship, ang tawag doon strong na entity, While yung entity na required yung participation, na pagka nawala yung relationship, mawawala na rin siya, ang tawag doon weak entity. And it is represented by, yung weak entity represented by a rectangle with double lines. Okay? Yung strong entity, pinag-aralan natin kanina, is represented by a rectangle na single line lang. Okay, so pagka nagkaroon na ng relationship at nagkaroon ka ng isang weak entity, any relationship na related sa isang weak entity ay magiging weak relationship. Okay? So, instead na diamond na single line lang, magkakaroon ka ng diamond na double lines. So, it denotes weak relationship dahil nga may weak entity relating to it. Ayan. So, dito tayo sa next slide. A weak non-identifying entity can be identified uniquely only by considering the primary key of the strong entity. And so, ang nangyayari, pag meron kang strong related to a weak entity, yung weak entity is nagiging dependent dun sa strong entity. Ayan. And normally, ang nangyayari, yung yung employee, yung strong entity, ini-incorporate niya as foreign key yung weak na entity. So, yung primary key ni weak entity, ma-add dun sa strong entity. Yan. So, dito sa ilalim, ano ba yung different types ng relationship? Again, merong strong relationships represented by a single line diamond. So, kung may binary relationship ka na may dalawang entities at saka yung dalawang entities na yon na related by the relationship or associated by a relationship, pareho siyang optional participation, or other words is strong entity siya, magiging strong din yung relationship. While, yun nga, pagka may isang strong entity related sa isang weak entity, magiging weak na yung relationship, and yung weak relationship is represented by a diamond with double lines. Meron tayong tinatawag na associative relationship. Ito naman yung isang diamond na nakalagay sa loob ng box, ng rectangle. Ito yung mga relationships na nagiging entity of itself. Okay? So, nagkakaroon ng sariling existence itong relationship na pwedeng i-relate natin siya. Itong relationship na to, pwede nang tawagin na associative relationship, is magkakaroon ng relationship sa other entities. Ayan. So, primary key, minimal set of attributes which uniquely identify an instance of an entity. Ayan. So, primary key. Choose one primary key from the many candidate keys. Primary keys must be unique, which should be the key. Ayan, may tanong tayo dito, no? Which should be the key? Is it the social security number or name? So, dapat daw kasi is unique. So, yung name, pwedeng magkapareho ng name. So, yung social security number, ayun, bawal magkaroon ng magkaparehong security number. So, I think dito sa dalawa, alin yung better na gawing primary key? Yung name ba or yung SSN? I think it's better na SSN. Okay? Ayan, meron tayong another na relationship dito, which is called is a hierarchy or is a relationship. May dalawang types ng relationship ito depending kung upward relationship or downward. Pagka upward, ang tawag doon generalization, pag downward, specialization. So, denoted by yung tinatawag na is-a triangle. So, ang is-a is is, tapos dapat may dash, dash A. Huwag niyong kakalimutan yung dash kasi malilito yung babasa niyan. Okay, so pagka yung triangle ng is-a ay paturo sa taas, ang tawag doon ay generalization. Pag yung triangle naman ay pababa or baliktad yung triangle, specialization ang tawag doon. Ibig sabihin, pag generalization, nag-i-exist muna yung nasa ibaba and then pag-iisahin natin siya sa papunta sa iisang entity. While yung specialization naman, isang entity lang, isa-separate natin or i-classify natin siya into two. Ayun. So, for example, given ka ng hourly employees at saka regular employees. To simplify, pwede nating to simplify the two entities, pwede tayong mag-generate ng generalized version ng dalawang entities na yon. So, ayun, is yung hourly employee at saka regular employee, pwede nating i-generalize is a employee. Dapat ay naka-ER diagram. Hindi ko na edit. Ina-edit ko na. Dapat singular. Yan. Okay, so ang correct na representation ng entity again ay singular noun. So again, yung hourly emp at saka regular emp ay i-generalize into employee. Pero kung given ka ng employee, tapos kailangan mo siyang i-specify kung what type of employee, so yung is triangle natin, magiging pointing down. Ayun, pwede natin i-divide into two or several entities. So yung employee pala, pwede natin i-classify as an hourly employee or regular employee. So pwede ring meron kang employee. Kagaya dun sa, ang normal na in-specialize natin na entity ay yung mga unary ang relationship. Kanina, di ba, meron tayong diagram na an employee supervises an employee. So, iisa lang ang entity, employee, tapos ang relationship is supervises. So, pwede nating ang ideal kasi lahat ng relationships natin is binary. Para maging binary yung unary relationship, so yung employee is specialized natin. So an employee is a supervisor, an employee is a supervisee. Ayan, pwedeng ganon. Or staff, pwede ring ganon, supervisee or staff. Okay, so ang resulting na na binary relationship from unary ginawang binary. So yung supervisor supervises staff or supervisor supervises supervisee. Ayun. So gagamit tayo ng is-a diagram. Okay, constraints in is-a relationship. So overlap constraints. So, pwede bang yung isang employee ay pareho siyang hourly employee as well as regular employee? So, normally ang hourly employee is contractual, ano? At dahil sa batas, sa labor law, pagka ni-regular mo yan, kailangan regular din or monthly ang sweldo. Pagka hourly or daily yung sweldo, normally ay contractual employee yan. So, this allowed na si Joe ay hourly employee at saka as well as regular employee. And depende na lang sa business rules and yung batas, ano. So, pag gumagawa kayo ng system, dapat familiar din kayo sa ano, no, mga batas surrounding that system. Okay, covering constraints. Does every employee entity also have to be an hourly employee or a regular employee entity? Ayan. So, ang bawat employee ba ay kailangang i-classify into hourly or a regular employee? So, in this case, yes. Dapat he is either hourly or regular. Yan. So, reasons for using is-a. Bakit ba ginagamit natin yan? So, ang purpose niyan is to add descriptive attributes specific to a subclass. Meron tayong main class at saka yung produce na class in terms of specialization, nagkakaroon tayo ng subclass. So, kung nagsimula tayo sa subclasses, magkakaroon tayo ng main class. So, to identify entities that participate in a relationship. Yan. Later, magagamit natin yon. So, dito, no, actually, medyo unfamiliar ako dito sa ER diagram na to. Yung tinatawag na aggregation. Used when we must model a relationship involving entity sets and a relationship set. So, ang relationship set, yung project sponsors department. So, isang binary relationship siya, pero makita natin, surrounded by a rectangle na with dotted lines. And then, yung buong binary relationship na yun is associated to employees with the relationship na monitors. So, yung buong project sponsors department na relationship was related to employee by the monitor's relationship. So, aggregation allows us to treat a relationship set as an entity set for purposes of participation in other relationships. Actually, dun sa pinakita ko kanina na types of relationship, mas familiar ako dun sa associative relationship kaysa dito sa aggregation, So, I'm thinking na yung associative relationship is the same lang dito sa aggregation, but ayan, wala akong makitang resource sa internet na nagdi-differentiate or nagre-relate sa aggregation at saka dun sa associative relationship. Okay, so in terms of design, ayan, meron tayo ditong titled na slide na aggregation or ternary relationship. So, ito nasa kaliwa na na drawing, ito yung ternary version, Yung employee is related to project and department by means of the monitors or sponsors na relationship. Ayan. So, medyo magulo, no? Actually, ang problema dito sa ternary relationship na to is that pag binago natin yung values, for example, ng until at saka since, ng until, yung until na attribute lang, kailangan baguhin natin yung since na value din. So, very rigid itong ternary relationship. Kaya hanggat maaari, wala tayong relationship na ternary. So, binary or i-convert natin dun sa pinag-uusapan natin kanina na aggregation. Ayun. So, magkakaroon tayo ng relationship sets na related sa entity. Okay, conceptual design using ER model. Design choices. Should the concept be modeled as an entity or an attribute? Should the concept be modeled as an entity or a relationship? Identifying relationships, binary or ternary or aggregation. So, ayan. So, ito yung mga kailangan natin pagdesisyonan. Sabi ko nga kanina, pag may ternary tayo, better i-convert natin siya sa aggregation. Pero yun nga, mas familiar ako dun sa associative relationship. So, ako, yung ternary, kino-convert ko sa associative relationship. Constraints in ER model. A lot of data semantics can and should be captured. So, yung meaning ng data dapat intact, hindi nababago yan pagka nagmo-model ka ng database mo. So, hindi nababago yung meaning. But some constraints cannot be captured in ER diagrams. So, ito yung limitation. Okay, entity versus attribute. So, ang tanong, should address be an attribute of employees or an entity? So, per entity, isang table ang isang entity. So, ang tinatanong dito is that yung address ba, is it better na pag gumawa ka ng table of employees, isa lang siya doon sa attribute nun or ihiwalay mo? So, depende yun, Ayan. So, if we have several addresses per employee, addresses must be an entity. So, kung yung address na attribute mo is multi-valued, kung baga, better na i-separate mo yung table. So, kasama na naman yun doon sa tinatawag na nating normalization. Kasi isa sa pinag-usapan natin kanina, per entity instance, kailangan walang multi-value na cell. Okay? Walang multi-value na sa bawat entity instance, walang multi-value na attribute. So, pag may multi-value, kailangan paghiwalayin natin yon. Ayan. If the structure is important, we want to retrieve employees in a given city, address must be modeled as an entity. Ayan. So, kung daw kailangan natin paghiwa-hiwalayin, isang address lang, pero kailangan nating i-identify yung mga sub-attribute ng attribute na address. For example, yung city, street. Ayan. So, better na yung address ay gawin nating entity instead na attribute lang. Okay? Ayan. Binary or ternary. So, meron tayong given na binary relationship na employees works in departments. Makikita natin merong merong dalawa na na-generate na attribute yung relationship na works in. So, baka kailangang mag-generate ng another na entity dahil dalawa na yung attributes ni works in. So, magkakaroon tayo ng ternary. Ayan. And sabi ko nga, hanggat maaari walang ternary. So, from ternary, gagawin natin yan na associative relationship. Ayan. Okay, so ang assignment naman dito, entity in the entity or in the relationship. So, ang tanong dito is, pag may na-generate tayo na na attribute, may na-identify tayo na attribute, lumabas dun sa relationship, is it sa relationship ba natin talaga ilalagay or dun sa alinman dun sa related entity? So, importante yung meaning na ma-generate. Pagka misleading na, so better na i-transfer natin sa entity instead na nasa relationship. Yung relationship kasi nag-generate din yan ng sarili niyang table. Ayan. So, pag naging table na siya, another entity na siya. Okay? So, ano ba yung kailangan nating i-consider kung saan natin i-assign yung attribute? dapat hindi siya mag-generate ng data redundancy at saka hindi misleading. Ayan. So, depende na rin sa pwede na rin natin i-follow sa business rules. Kagaya nito, yung D-budget or department budget, yung kailangan i-consider. So, sino yung may control sa pag-aalat? So, kung yung manager ang employee manager, yung magko-control ng budget, so better assign sa employee. Kumbaga, isang employee yung nagmamanage ng several departments, ibigay mo sa employee. Pero kung per department may sariling budget, hindi mo pwedeng ilipat-lipat, so sa department ilalagay. Okay. Ayan. So, yung kaninang given, saan ilalagay yung D-budget na na attribute, ayan. So, yung employee ay in-specialize natin into manager. Employee is a manager. Mali yung triangle, dapat pababa. Kasi nauna yung employee, yung triangle dapat paturo sa manager. And then yung manager, nagkaroon siya ng attribute na D-budget. And then manages a department. Ayan. Okay, so binary or ternary. If each policy is owned by one employee, ayun, yung policy is yung policy entity dito, no? And each dependent is tied to the covering policy, the diagram shown is inaccurate. So, to improve this, dito tayo sa susunod na slide. Ayun, so, ayun nga, magkakaroon tayo ng aggregation, relationship aggregation. So, yung employee has a dependent, pero yung employee-dependent relationship is aggregatedly related to, associated to a policy ng relationship na covered by. Ayan. So, mas, kumbaga, nawawala yung inaccuracy. Ayan, mas accurate na siya. Okay, so, better design. So, ang ginawa natin dito, nag-generate tayo ng another na entity which is coverage. So, the employees has coverage, yun yung relationship. So, binary na rin yun. Then, yung coverage to dependent, another relationship na binary din. And yung coverage is related to the policy by the relationship defined. So, binary relationship na rin. So, better yung design. Pero logical lang to. How do we express this in... Ayun. So, kanina yung aggregated relationship, ginawa nating logical. So, mas, na to, kumbaga, mas mabilis nang represent ng SQL natin. Physical na nga pala yung susunod dito. Since meron na tayong conceptual, then may logical, yung physical na yung susunod. Okay, binary versus ternary relationships. In the previous example, illustrated a case when two binary relationships were better than one ternary relationship. An example in the other direction, a ternary relationship contracts relates entity sets, parts, departments, and suppliers, and has descriptive attribute quantity. No combination of binary relationships is an adequate substitute. Okay, so wala tayong diagram nito, pero dinidescribe niya yung isang relationship. So, kung anong problema pagka ternary. Okay, conceptual design, summary of conceptual design. Conceptual design follows requirement analysis. ER model popular for conceptual design. So, naging popular nga ito nung medyo matagal na. Pero ngayon, UML na mas maraming gumagamit sa pagkaalam ko ng UML. Basic constructs, entities, attributes, and relationships. Some additional constructs like weak entities is hierarchies and aggregation. Okay. Several kinds of integrity constraints can be expressed in the ER model. Key constraints, participation constraints, and overlap covering constraints of ER hierarchies. Some foreign key constraints are also implicit, the definition of a relationship set. Implicit in the definition of a relationship set. So sabi dito, some constraints cannot be expressed in ER model, kagaya ng functional dependencies. Constraints play an important role in determining the best database design for an enterprise. Okay, ER design is subjective. There are often many ways to model a given scenario. Analyzing alternatives can be tricky, especially for a large enterprise. Common choices include entity versus attribute, entity versus relationship, binary or n-nary relationship, whatever or not to use is a hierarchy, and whether or not to use aggregation. Ito yung choices natin. Ensuring good database design resulting in relational schema should be analyzed and refined further. So, functional dependencies, information, and normalization techniques are especially helpful. Ayan. So, sa analysis natin ng database design, ayan, yung normalization technique is important. So, meron akong another na video in terms of normalization using Peter Chen ERD notation. Ayan. So, yung functional dependencies kanina, di ba sabi kanina, hindi mabilis i-represent ito using ERD, Peter Chen notation. So, ang ginagamit natin is yung table format. Yun. So, makita natin yung functional dependency. So, normally, yung Peter Chen notation is used together with yung table format ng visual representation. Ayan. So, combination lang yan. Unlike UML kasi, sa UML, pwede natin ipakita yung relationship, entity relationship model with together with yung pinapakita natin yung mga functional dependencies. Ayan. So with that, tapos na yung ating discussion regarding database design. Okay, so pag available na yung quizzes or activities regarding this module, kindly answer them. And then, eto na yung pinaka-last topic for our midterm exam. Ayan. So, hopefully, makuha nyo lahat ng mga definitions na to. And then, sa next term na natin, sa finals na natin, gamitin talaga, doon natin intindihin kung paano ginagamit ang ERD for normalization and then yung database design. So, doon natin i-apply yung natutunan natin sa conceptual design, sa physical design, logical design, and physical design. Okay, with that, see you again sa ating susunod na module and hopefully ma-apply nyo ito sa ating mga project na importante sa finance. Okay, thank you.